Story 1. I Steal Bodies. Part 1. I am dead. Well, at least the real me is. You see, this body I'm using to write this isn't mine. I stole it. Don't worry, I won't be using him for too long. Once I'm done writing this all out, I'll give it back to him. He won't even know that anything happened. I'll even be sure to tuck him back into bed once I'm done. So, let me begin. When I was still alive, I was your average 24-year-old guy. I wasn't into witchcraft or anything. In fact, quite the opposite. Before I died, I didn't even believe in the supernatural. Now that I think about it, the way I died really was quite embarrassing. I was cleaning a gun when... Wait. That wasn't my original body. It's been so long I almost forgot. No, I remember now. I was just about to have a bubble bath. The last time I had one, I was probably about 4 years old. I was admittedly a bit excited. So excited that I managed to trip on my way to the now full tub. My head landed square on the edge of the tub, knocking me out instantly. My unconscious body managed to slide into the water, and I drowned. Next thing I knew, I was in limbo. I suppose I probably went unclaimed by whatever happens in the afterlife, and so I was placed in the waiting room while the higher-ups sorted me out. It actually appeared as if I was in a literal waiting room, the kind you see at every doctor's office. There was no one else in the room, though, just me and some terrible elevator-type music coming from overhead. Now that I think about it, maybe this was hell. After what seemed like an eternity, the music stopped. I heard a ding, and a voice came from overhead. "Thank you for waiting. Please make your way to the door on your right and step through." Well, I didn't really have any other options, so I obliged. I made my way to the door and stepped through. There was a man waiting for me on the other side. "Welcome. Please take a seat wherever you feel comfortable," he said, this gesturing at the many different seats in the room. It looked like a therapy room. There were couches and a few regular chairs. I took a seat in one of the chairs, and I tried to study the man. Even now I couldn't explain him if I tried. It was as if his face was constantly shifting. He certainly had some aura about him. I'm pretty sure he was a god of some sort, or at least some type of higher being. Where am I then? I finally asked. I suppose most humans would call this purgatory, or maybe limbo. In short, we weren't quite sure what to with you. What do you mean? Can't you just send me to heaven or hell, or whatever? He laughed. That was certainly on the table. We decided to play rock, paper, scissors for you, and I was the big winner. So I've decided I'm going to give you a second shot at life. So I'm going to be reborn, I asked. I chose to ignore the fact that apparently these gods had decided my fate by a game of rock, paper, scissors. Not exactly. Oh, you'll figure it out soon enough. This was the last thing he said. He then snapped his fingers. I was back in my bathroom staring at my lifeless corpse. Was I a ghost? Is this what he meant by a second shot at life? That doesn't seem quite right. I looked down at myself, and I appeared to be normal. I would have thought I was still alive if my corpse wasn't lying across the room. I waited by my body. Somebody would have to come for me eventually. It took 2 days before a police officer finally made his way into my bathroom and found my corpse. I had confirmed my theory of being some sort of ghost before he ever got there, though. In those 2 days of waiting, I had never gotten tired, hungry, or thirsty. It was just added confirmation when the officer sprinted past me and pulled my lifeless body out of the bathtub. I had tried moving objects during my wait, but I was unable to do anything but look. I hadn't gotten the chance to try and touch another person, though. I approached the officer as he called for paramedics. I placed my hand on his shoulder, and the next thing I knew I was blinking and breathing. I hadn't thought about it, but I hadn't done either of these two things in the past 2 days. It had been unnecessary before. I looked around the room before spotting my mirror. I was no longer a ghost. I was now the officer. I had taken control of his body. I was a bit clumsy at first in my new body, but after a few minutes it seemed like I had full control. Just as I got the hang of things, my head, or rather the officer's head, began to pound intensely. After a few seconds of agonizing head pain, I found myself once again staring at the officer from the outside. I had been kicked out of his body. The officer was holding his head while hunched over. "What the hell just happened?" he said. He didn't seem to understand that his body had just been briefly hijacked. I approached him and attempted to touch him again, but nothing happened this time. I wasn't able to retake his body. I didn't know at the time, but there are certain rules for my body-snatching abilities, one of which is when I'm kicked out, I can't get back in. I've gotten much better at using my abilities since then. After a while, paramedics came to collect my body. There two came into the bathroom, one man and one woman. I knew I was going to try and do what I had done with the cop, but which one should I choose? I highly considered the woman just for the experience, but I wasn't quite ready at the time to take control of a female body. I touched the man's shoulder. Once again I found myself in control. This time the transition seemed much smoother, though. I continued to help the woman with collecting my corpse as to not seem suspicious. Several minutes passed, and the headache didn't come this time. With the help of the other paramedic, he placed my original body in a bag and wheeled it back to the ambulance. I began to make my way to the passenger seat when the woman stopped me. "Where are you going?" "You always drive." Yeah? Sorry. I'm actually not feeling so good right now. Do you mind driving?" I said back to her, "Fine, but you are buying my dinner." I began to realize that taking this body may have been a mistake. I didn't know the first thing about being an EMT. If I stayed in this body, I may end up costing other people their lives. There was one problem, though. I had no clue how to separate myself from the body. I had been kicked out of the cop's body, but this one didn't seem to be putting up much resistance. I needed to find a way out on my own. I put everything I had in trying to wool myself out of the body. It was a fruitless effort, though. How was I supposed to do this? Getting in had been so easy. Shouldn't getting out be the easy part? I bit down on the man's thumb. It's a habit I've always had. When I get frustrated, I bit hard enough to draw blood. I stared down at the small wound, once again wishing I could just leave this body. As I thought this, the headache returned, and a few moments later I was outside the paramedic's body. What had triggered it? Had it in the wound? Possibly a combination of my desire to leave and the wound? I wasn't quite sure at the time, but I was happy to be out again. I followed the paramedics all the way back to the hospital. After they wheeled my body inside, I decided it would be best if I just left. I wouldn't be getting back in my own body. I began to seek out someone new. I realized I should really study someone before I tried taking them. If I wanted to take them long term, that is, I would need to know all the basics. Their relationships, their job, their hobbies, mannerisms, etc. I couldn't expect to take over someone's life without knowing anything about them. I could use other bodies for short periods of time like I am doing now, but that would only be for specific purposes. There are over 7 billion people on Earth, though, so I'm not too worried about running out of equity. I also didn't fully understand my abilities, though. I would need to practice using my body stealing powers more, and I really needed to find the correct way to leave a body I didn't want to stay in. I have much more to tell, but this all I have time for right now. I can't stay too long in this body or they will find me. I'll be back soon with a new body to write more. For now, it's time to put this guy back to bed. Part 2. I found a suitable replacement. This body should last me a few days before they find me. I'll explain who they are in due time, but for now, let's pick up where I left off. After I finally said goodbye to my original body, I began to practice my body stealing powers. Entering a body was the easy part. However, I discovered many things about my capabilities. I could enter any body I wanted. All I had to do was touch the person. How long I could stay was another thing. Those with a strong mental fortitude, like the police officer, could kick me out almost instantly. Those people were rare, though. Most people were easy to overpower, and I could take control for as long as I wanted. Exiting the body was a little bit trickier. For those with weaker willpower, I had to force them to want their body back in order to get out. Physical pain was usually enough to do it. I had to want out as well, though. I could damage a weaker person's body as much as I wanted, but if I didn't want out, then they wouldn't get their body back. It would be risky to take the body of someone who doesn't value their life, because I may have to kill them in order to exit the body. For those wondering if I can take over the body of an animal, I certainly try. Most animals avoid me like the plague, though. Birds don't seem to mind me, but anything else runs at first sight. I was able to pet a dog who trapped itself in its doghouse, but I wasn't given control of his body. I think it must be a compatibility thing. The whole time I was learning to use my abilities, I found something a bit odd. Not once did I ever run into another dead person. If I'm a ghost, shouldn't I be able to see other ghosts? Maybe it doesn't work like that, though. I couldn't possibly be the only person like this, though. Could I? Regardless, once I began to get the hang of my abilities, I began to seek a proper host. I could have searched for someone younger with an undeveloped personality, but I really did not want to go through the younger years of life again. I wanted someone basically like me, a loner. They needed to have a decent job, though, and if they were a little more attractive than my original body, then who would I be to complain? It took a while, but eventually I found the perfect body. He was about the same age as I had been when I died. Despite his young age, he had climbed his way up to a managerial position at a factory. Behind the scenes, he was quite lonely, though. He had poured everything into his job. I never saw him talk to any family, and he never had friends over to his home. As far as looks go, he was no Brad Pitt, but I don't think he would have problems attracting the opposite sex. I watched him for a while before taking over. It was important for me to at least learn how to properly do his job. I had never been a manager before. He was a business-only sort of person at work. so I wouldn't have to worry too much about his work relations. After I felt I had learned enough, I stole his body. It really was a perfect match. When I was in his body, it was like it was my own again. He didn't try to fight to push me out either. I decided I wasn't going to waste this life doing nothing like I had the last one. I kept his job, of course, but I started becoming more social. I went to bars, clubs, and other social events. I even managed to bring a few girls back to my new home from time to time. Before I knew it, I had been in my new body for an entire year. I had almost forgotten that I even had a previous life. Everything seemed to be going perfect, but of course good things can't last forever, can they? I noticed someone had begun to follow me. It was a black car with heavily tinted windows. Wherever I went, that car always seemed to be there. I tried to get its license plate, but it never seemed to get close enough for me to see it. I tried reporting it to the police, but they said they couldn't do anything unless I had evidence that I was being stalked. They sent a patrol car through my neighborhood, but that was all. The car was obviously gone by the time the police showed up, though. As quickly as it began, it ended just as quickly. After about 2 weeks of the car stalking me, it just disappeared. Perhaps I'd just been overly paranoid after all. I resumed my new life as if nothing had ever happened. That was a mistake. I woke up a few nights later to find myself surrounded by at least 5 hooded figures. Before I had time to react, a knife was plunged into my chest. Blood began to spew from chest as I felt the life fading from me. I was able to eject myself from the body just before my host took his last breath. After I left the body, the figures turned to face my ghost self. Could they see me? The one who had plunged the knife into me approached me. Once he was close to me, he began to kneel, and then he held out his hand. I wasn't sure what to do, so I ran. For whatever reason, they didn't seem to chase after me. I ran for several miles before I even thought of stopping, though. I found an old, rundown house, and I let myself in. I sat down on the floor and tried to process what had just happened. Before I got the chance, a voice spoke. "Rough night, huh?" In front of me was the God who had given me my powers. Rough night. I was just killed again, I said angrily. Well, it wasn't really you. It was the body you stole. I probably should have told you about them, though. Them, you know who they are? Well, yeah, I know who everyone is. Those people are special, though. They are part of a cult that worships me. It's kind of funny. They think you are their savior. What about this is funny? If they think I'm their savior, then why the hell did they put a knife in my chest? It's simple, really. They don't think that was the right body for you. They are a bit crazy, but they have always been loyal to me, so I rewarded them by helping find you. Why would you do that? I don't want to be a part of this, I shouted. Because this is the most fun I've had in years. I mean, come on, doesn't being the savior of a cult sound a little cool? I don't want to be in a cult. I just wanted to live a normal life again. I promised you a new life. I didn't promise you a normal one. If you don't want to be in a cult, you should really start moving. They are almost here. As he finished saying this, I noticed headlights coming up the street. I didn't give it a second thought. I ran again. I managed to make it to a busy stoplight. I took over a driver and drove as far as I possibly could. I swapped from body to body on my trip. I didn't want to take anyone too far away from their life since I wouldn't be keeping any of these bodies. I'm currently in a small town on the East Coast. I think I may try to catch a flight to another country soon. I think they will find me eventually no matter what, but it could at least buy me some time to figure out what I should do. I've become part of a game for a god, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't think he's going to let me into any sort of afterlife anytime soon. So it seems I have two options: keep running, become the savior of a cult. Who would have known my life after death would be so much more interesting? Part 3. It's been a few days since my last update, and these days have been the craziest of my life, or afterlife, I suppose. I had been body hopping around trying to put as much distance between myself and the cult chasing me. I hadn't seen any sign of them, but I also have no clue how big and how much power they have, not to mention they have a god helping them. I decided I would take a plane to somewhere in Europe. Eventually I decided upon Germany. I'm pretty sure I had some German heritage in me, and I wasn't exactly sure where else I would go, so I picked it when I saw there would be a plane departing soon. I helped myself to a body that was seated in first class, and I attempted to relax. My relaxation attempt was cut short, however, since I had taken a body in first class. One had boarded first. I was sat isolated from the main section of the plane. There was no way for me to know that no one else had entered the plane. It took me a few minutes to notice that I was completely alone first class. I stood up a bit anxious and began to make my way to where I had entered the plane. As I approached the entrance, I saw a few large men in suits, and they began to walk towards me. I knew I was trapped, but I still attempted to turn around and run to the back of the plane. Before I could, however, I felt a quick pain in my neck, and I fell unconscious. When I woke up, I noticed I was still in the body of the wealthy stranger I had taken. However, I was in a straitjacket now. Not only that, but there was some sort of mouthpiece holding my teeth down. This prevented me from moving my mouth whatsoever. I looked up to see there was a young man sitting next to me. He was probably early 20s. He had dark brown hair and bright green eyes. He had strong facial features and almost seemed to be glowing. I'm sorry about the restraints. They are only temporary. We didn't want to have to chase you again, he spoke. He almost seemed to be waiting for a response, but then he must have remembered I was incapable of giving one. So he continued on his own. You have nothing to fear. Our God has gifted us with you, and you shall lead us. I have been given the honor to become one with you. Soon we will share a body as we lead the world to new heights. His voice was almost hypnotic. I found myself entranced by his words. I had no clue what this cult had planned, but his body certainly wouldn't be a bad place to call home. While I was replaying what he said in my head, I didn't notice that he had begun to move closer. Before I knew it, he was right in front of me. He expertly pulled out a blade and slit the throat of the body I was in. I was ejected from the body as it went limp. Before I could react, the man grabbed my hand. I found myself in the cultist's body. Even though I had full control, something felt different. This body just felt right, even better than the one I had spent over a year in. It was as if this body was truly the one I was meant to be in. Maybe this cult knew a few things after all. After a few moments, I heard a door behind me open, A few people in robes entered the room. They were of various ages and appearance, but they all shared one characteristic: green eyes. Once about 10 of them had entered the room, they began to kneel. One of the older ones in front began to speak. "We have been blessed by your awakening. Hopefully the body we chose for you is suitable for now. You may replace it in the future if you wish. What do you want from me?" I reply, "We already have our plans prepared. We simply wish for you to guide us in the new world, will you?" Yes, I had said it without hesitation. But why? I didn't even know what this cult's plan was. Why did I say yes so quickly? Then I remembered whose body I was in. Did he still have influence over me? He hadn't tried to kick me out. Well, he had actually forced me inside. It was unlike any other times I had taken a body. I thought I was in full control. But could it be possible the cultist still had some power over his body? After my agreement, all of the cultists that had already been kneeling began to press their heads to the ground as if in prayer. The older one that had been speaking to me stood up, however. "We knew you wouldn't fail us. Please follow me. I have much to show you, Master," he said. He showed me everything. The cult is much larger than even I expected. There are thousands of followers, and many of them in places of power. As I am sure you can already guess, all of them have green eyes. Their grand plan is something incredibly sinister. They have been ingrained in positions of power for centuries, but they had never made any real moves. With my existence, however, they are ready to act. They believe my rebirth calls for a rebirth of the planet. They have the firepower to do it, too. I could probably stop them, but I don't know that I want to anymore. Once most of the world's population is gone, I will be the one to rule over those who are left. Perhaps it is this body that has made me think this way, but I'm not sure anymore. So why am I telling you all this? Well, it's mostly because I can. There is nothing you can do to stop what is coming, but if you have green eyes, perhaps I can save you. For the rest of you, try to enjoy the time you have left. Story 2. I'm where I should be. My mom died, and I could not accept it for 9 years afterward. Declared a suicide. Went mad looking for what happened, until one day I resigned to it and decided what happened. I let my mind rest in this house, away from all the possibilities that I could have done something, or that I could even understand what did it. But now I write this to tell you what did. Maybe it will prevent something, maybe not. I wouldn't be writing this if it weren't for a story I found one night in the house alone. My children grown and my wife divorced. I was scrolling through one of those websites filled with little horror stories, though in my middle age I had outgrown an excitement for goosebumps. I searched for those that could still find a drop of something sad inside me, and that's all it was. Until I read this. My sister's death. Something is killing the lonely people in Lake W. It killed my sister. I tried to tell people, but the more I spoke up, the more they dismissed me. I don't know what else to do other than to write this and post it, hoping that someone might believe the words. I would publish this under my name or a pen name if all previous efforts hadn't given rise to further doxing, harassment, and creative death threats, none of which I hadn't received before, but now these threats are sometimes realized. That being said, I think the trolls have nothing to do with my sister's death. It is simply too good of a cut for them not to push. But they've only ever wanted me. I want this as a record. She was in her 30s, black hair, big glasses, 6 feet high and underweight. a creative person who made a meager living on murals and portraits. One day she became conflicted after volunteering for a school's art workshop and realizing she wanted a family of her own, yet had only a small pool of friends and an introverted character. We tried to set her up, but found her tastes unpredictable and ambiguous. She never had a relationship or sex from what I know. All she decided was that whoever the mate would be, they would be too mysterious. She bought a dress she saw in the movie Monocultures and Lemonade, a film featuring a beautiful ecologist, a thing of silk and green leaf patterns like a modern flapper's gown. She was seen every weekend in one bar and one club, a nouveau muse visiting Lake W's land of particle board dance floors and dusty bars. Though the town started wanting her wallflower gaze, she didn't want the town back, and so her dress was next seen in photos on dating apps and online ads. Searching for mates beyond the town's border, she created a system, a lightning rod for serendipitous romance. Every post and profile was an open invitation to the world. Anyone was invited to Friday lunch. Any and every Friday with her at the Café Sue's indefinitely, and so she dined every Friday afternoon, whether expecting or not. I could sense she was lonelier than she let on, so I sometimes accompanied her, which would often end up with her and I dining with a waiter or a cook. They told me accounts of negligence and fraud, and one day I published an article about it. Despite my sister's pleading, this resulted in a common tactic at the time to ban me from the place. My sister was lectured by the owners not to discuss with me anything that went on there, though she was used to this, and we discussed anyway. Shortly after this event, she would not find a date for 3 months, and the staff were prohibited from dining with her. She became an expert observer, understanding every storyline in the cafe and keeping a record of it to pass the time. And then one day she called to let me know, after so many months of sitting alone, that she had once again found a date. She sounded nervous. He was too mysterious, I suppose. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The next day I got a phone call from the police, which is not out of the ordinary for me. I was familiar with the officer who called, and she asked if I knew the whereabouts of my sister. I told her not since yesterday afternoon. She hung up. A day after that I checked my email accounts, where an email titled "Hello from your aunt" turned out to be a piece of disguised hate mail making the usual threats to myself, my friends, my family, and mentioning the current drama with the cafe. My spam filter had about 300 or so emails like this at the time. The next day I received a phone call from my officer friend who asked me again where my sister was. I asked her if something was wrong. She went quiet. This is how I found my sister's body, left to rot for 3 days in the women's room of the Café Sue's. They sealed the door before I arrived, bored of keeping it a secret from me and wanting the smell to go away. Her wrists were slit. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. It's complicated to sue your own town, and so I set some friends to the work of the trial. While I buried my sister, the death and the trial ignited a new scale of fervor that kept me inside. I was not allowed in stores, police would not answer my calls, and I was often stopped in the street by an angry stranger who would do everything but hit me. For the record, I don't believe the town killed her, nor do I think she committed suicide. She was lonely, yes, but she told me everything. She would have talked to me first. Those in the cafe wouldn't tell me who she saw that afternoon, but messages on her phone revealed him. I wanted to seek him out, but journeying outside my home wasn't imaginable. So I sat and waited and mourned and missed her. A week passed, and one night something began slamming on my door. I peered out a crack in the blinds and saw her bony fists hitting the wood. A man sat in a truck in my driveway. I opened the door, and she was shorter than I. She looked back at the man in the truck and, without word, opened her fist and handed me a crumpled letter. I said, "What's wrong?" "Just take it," she said. I did, and this upset her more. She cried softly, saying nothing. I offered her a tissue. Seconds later, her hands were around my throat, squeezing life out of me. The man ran from the truck towards us. My fist found the woman's jaw as she screamed about my sister being a murdering slut, a whore, a homewrecker, and us in a conspiracy, wanting to kill the town one by one. I kicked her in the chest, and she would have fallen down the porch stairs and broken her neck if the man hadn't caught her. He looked at me with disgust before turning away with the woman. "Let's go home, Mom," he said. And then they drove away. I read her letter. She was the wife of the man my sister met a few hours before her death. Now he was dead, too, just a week later. Some kind of suicide. The letter claimed that his death was actually staged by my sister and I as revenge against the town, though I didn't quite understand how she thought this. That didn't prevent her from filing a restraining order and placing her husband's death on the allegations against me. For the next week I received many official documents pronouncing that I was a person of interest in various local deaths that had happened for up to 10 years ago. The town created a murder case against me, and I was their murderer. I could not ignore the strangeness of the husband's death. I examined my sister's journal and, with some research, found out what happened to the date before this man. A woman from a town over died of a suicide within hours of seeing my sister. I can't rely on the police. Don't currently have the money to hire a private investigator, and I don't know how much longer I can live here. From what I can tell, these 3 deaths are only connected in that they all look like suicides and, weirdly, they all swiped right. If you know who I am and you know something that can help, please find me. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I went to bed after reading this. My hands shook nervously. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I knew that everything was reversed. I accepted long ago my mother's death, but the story of these 3 deaths perfectly matched the circumstances surrounding hers. The 9 years of searching and thinking and trying to understand that day, all of that I had put to rest in boxes in one of the kids' rooms. I found rest without the anger that built those boxes before I read that story, when I had figured out a space to be in my empty house. But after reading the words, I opened those boxes again. With a few guesses and a call to a few friends, I found the woman's address and pulled my truck up to her house the next day. It was a tiny room covered in shade by tall magnolia trees. I knocked and no one answered, so I went around to the backyard and knocked there too. And while no one answered there either, I heard the muted sounds of a dish being washed under running water and a woman's voice singing a low song. I walked back and took a piece of paper from my truck and sat on her front porch while I wrote her a letter. Writing with my shaking hands left my penmanship much to be desired, and as I approached the description of my mother's death, my entire body began to shake until the pen fell from my fingers. When I walked over to retrieve it, I could not force myself to bend down and pick it up. If I finished the letter, it would set in motion everything again. If I did not, maybe I could get back in the truck, drive home, close the boxes, exit the page I had read the story on, turn off the computer, put it in my truck, and drive the whole thing into the lake. Then the front door opened, and a woman stepped out with a rifle and pointed it at me. If you're thinking about doing something weird, this thing in my hands is called a gun. My heart raced, and I went to raise my hands, but found them stuck to my sides. I wanted to push her back in the door. It was some kind of shock, the odd thing of stepping back into an old way of thinking, one that drove my wife away and made me an angrier person. She loaded the gun. "Get back in your truck and leave. I'm not going to tell you again." I looked down at the pen and willed my hands to raise in a show of surrender, but I could not move them besides their nervous shake. "Leave now." The gun went off and I fell to the ground. My heart pumped slow. Then I opened my eyes to see the rifle had shot into the air, and the sound had brought movement back to me. I raised my hands, but then she abandoned notice of me entirely, Autumn blowing my half-written letter to her door. Where her eyes ran across the words, "H.M., she lowered the gun. "Come in." After picking myself up from her yard, I stepped into the house, where she asked me to empty my pockets into a bowl. The room I stepped into was furnished on two sides with desks, one side by a small stove and fridge, and the last a wall with a door that must have led to her room. Across the desks were dozens of battered cell phones flickering with new alerts. I dropped my things into the bowl. "You'll get this back when you leave," she said, and took the bowl into the other room. Then she came back and pulled a seat out for me while she and her rifle sat atop one of the desks. "Sorry about that. Necessary evil." One of the phones vibrated and she took momentary notice. "So you know about my sister. And something happened to your mother. Tell me. Actually, there's a file in my truck. I'll get it. You stay." She left and came back a moment later with the files, and sat down and scanned through the pages until she found the photo. "Okay, so this is really from her time of death?" she asked. "Yes." "And you're not crazy, right?" "I'm sane. The other file has the death certificate, if you want some proof." As she examined the rest of the documents, I saw the photo for the first time in a year, a grayscale image from a time security camera on my mother's porch. She stands alone at night, with one hand smoking a cigarette and the other braced against the porch railing, and then a third hand resting on her neck, but connected to nobody. The fingers are long and the nails trimmed to sharp points, and it holds her as if it were pulling her back. The woman finished reading and closed the files. She took a long stare at me, sigh, looked at the phones, then back at me, "Yeah." And with that knowing utterance out of the way, she explained her research using suicide records, her sister's correspondence, and software I didn't understand. She was doing some kind of pattern prediction, plugging in information about my mother and the two connected suicides. The program displayed 3 possible paths connecting her death with the sisters. The phones laid across the desks she said, were all installed with a hacked version of the dating app they had used and were constantly searching for the thing. I asked her what she thought it was. I've researched all the logical answers to that, and whatever it is, it's not in our current understanding. She got off the desk and walked into the kitchen to get something. When I saw her slightly limping, she noticed, smiled, and hitched a leg up on a chair and rolled up her pants. A long bandage was taped to her calf, a streak of dark red in the gauze. People in masks came here Friday, held me down, and did this to me. Told me if I don't leave town, the knife goes in my throat next. I went quiet. If you're another one of these Lake W morons who wants me dead, you should let me know. You've hurt a lot of people, I know, but I'm not violent. Prove it, huh? Stay here. Work with me. Keep an eye out for them. I barely sleep anymore because I'm always expecting some new shit to happen. I agreed and became her guard while she continued her work. During the day we said little, and at night we said nothing at all. I wouldn't say we were friends, but something awful found both of us, and we were united in our search to stop it. Though she did most of the work, her mood improved with sleep. Now that I kept watch until a few weeks passed, and one night, while sitting on the porch, 3 people in masks walked up the driveway. I stood. Don't come any closer, I said. One coughed, another sneezed, and the last was fine. The fine one said, I know, and you know she doesn't deserve to be protected. So move aside, White Knight. No, I said. Aren't you that man who went mad? I stayed quiet, and the window behind me squeaked open a crack, the barrel of her rifle extending out. There aren't just 3 of us anymore. You'll die by our hands or by the town's. And what do you think would be a kinder way to go? Madman, do you even like her? I know for a fact she's spat a bit in your direction, too. Leave, she shot at their feet. The 2 others ran away, but the fine one stayed. You think about the choice you're making. There's not much time to change your mind. And with that, the fine one walked away. It took another month, but one day she said that we had it. She turned a monitor to me, showing a trail of white nodes, deaths, leading to one red one. She picked up a phone and showed me the profile. It was inside a teenage boy. We argued for a day, not sure what to do, and by that time the boy had died and passed it on to a woman in her mid-20s. We tracked down this one's phone number and tried to explain the situation. She didn't listen, and she died the next weekend, passing it on to a 50-year-old man. This is useless. We can see where it is, but we still have no clue how to stop it, the woman said. Maybe this is as far as it goes. What else could we do other than try and kill whoever is holding it? And I'm not doing that. For a long time it rested in the 50-year-old man. One night we snuck outside his bedroom window, and in a desperate move, performed a ritual we'd found in a book about tribal death cultures. Nothing happened. We argued. I wanted to kill him, though we thought this would just transfer it to me. But I was getting impatient and angry. She claimed that my head was not always right, and the tremors were getting worse. I criticized her work in destroying the people of the town and teased that I would leave her alone to get attacked again. She told me this was over, and it was time for me to leave, and so I stepped out her front door. As chance would have it, in the driveway stood 5 people in masks. This time I walked right up to them. Wait till tomorrow afternoon so I can join you, I said. Really, the fine one said. not much use to me anymore. I went back home and shook uncontrollably in my bed, full-body seizures that would last half an hour. I would burst into fits of anger about it still being alive, about her obstructing its end. It would have been easier to let the town do what they were going to do, but I couldn't be sure it'd die with her. I picked up my phone, logged into one of her Dumby profiles, and matched with the 50-year-old man. I told him to meet at her house tomorrow morning. Just knock on the door. It was a date. The next morning I parked my truck across the road from her driveway and saw him drive in. Maybe 10 minutes later, there was the sound of her gun shooting multiple times, and I saw him run back and drive away. I drove up to her house, and the front door was open. The bowl was knocked over, a chair on its side, and her door locked, the sound of her crying muffled. "I'm sorry," I said through the door. "This way we can control what happens to it." "There's an awful thing inside me," she said. "Because of you, it will die with you. This is what we wanted. This is what you want. I want it out of me, you idiot." She shot her rifle through the door, and a bullet went through my shoulder. I clutched the wound. Fair enough. She stayed in her room, not knowing what to do. I wrapped my shoulder in gauze. A few hours later, 10 people in masks arrived in the driveway. I took a deep breath. "She's gone," I told the fine one. "Then who did that?" he asked, looking at my shoulder. "She didn't like me trying to stop her leaving." The fine one paused a moment. "Okay." And miraculously they left. Weeks passed, and she wouldn't come out of her room, knowing there was the possibility that just seeing me could transfer it and make her dead minutes later. Over the next few weeks, we tried many things to exorcise the thing inside of her. She'd cry. She hated me. She would not eat. At one point, she would not drink water, and yet she was fine. A week without water, and she kept shrieking and hating me. "I want to die. I want to die," she would moan. I don't understand how she stayed alive, other than that the thing kept her that way. During this time, I was racked with guilt, shame, and anger. Though my body shook with seizures, I did not feel punished enough, and I could not justify what I had done. Only the death of this thing would make it make any sense. One night I stood on the porch, debating on what to do. She was suffering, but then again, maybe there was something we hadn't tried yet. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something moving in the dark. The fine one stood in the driveway alone, now knowing the truth. "Tomorrow," they said, and then walked away. "I'll take care of it," I told her through the door quietly. "I won't lie." Even then I considered letting them do it. It would be easier than killing her myself, but she had suffered enough. She left her door open now, knowing what was to come. Still I waited until the next day, unable to summon the macabre force needed. Falling asleep in a chair, I woke up. It was the first day of winter, and a cold draft swam across the floor. Around noon, soft pats could be heard as the last leaves fell to the ground. I sat a long while listening. The sound grew, as if 100 trees were losing their leaves in a torrent, and when I looked out the window I saw over 100 people in masks collecting in her yard. I locked the front door and hurried, knowing there wasn't much time left. I entered her door and saw her for the first time in months. She rested on a small bed, her face gaunt and her muscles melted, and her sister's dress on her like a wire hanger. The front door exploded in a loud bang, and the small yard erupted in the shouting of a murderous people. "I'll close my eyes," she said, and it took little time with my hands. She was very weak. I slipped out the back door. When I got home, I was unsure of what had happened. My tremors died away, and for a while I was sure it was over, that we had killed it. A newspaper article came out announcing her death, a picture of her body tied to the flagpole outside town, a cloud of masks surrounding it. A month passed, and I would not leave my house, a last thread of doubt surviving in me. I had to know. One day I decided to do it. So I starved myself of water and food for a week and found I was still alive, and so was it. It brings me peace to know it's trapped inside me. I feel the third hand on my neck, but it will not leave this house, and nor will I. Maybe I will live forever. I don't know. What is living exactly when you can't meet someone else in the flesh, and your town is hell, and you deserve it? I have taken to talking to the squirrels in my yard, and running the program the woman created. I'm uncertain. She always understood this thing more than I did. But I think there's a chance this is not the only one. I've found other nodes leading to other things. So, like she had, I write this record. Please learn from this, and please do not find me. Story 3. The Quiet Game. Have you ever wondered why we see ghosts? Maybe they have a message for us. Perhaps they're trapped somewhere between our world and theirs, oblivious to the fact that time has gone on without them. There have been tales of long-lost family members visiting us in our dreams, and unexplainable coincidences that put a smile on your face. But for every heartwarming story of visits from the other side, there is a frightening account of an unwelcome presence that can send a chill down your spine. I could share a number of instances where I felt uneasy or even frightened by what I knew was an angry or negative spirit. However, the story I am about to share is one that has cast a dark cloud over my nightmares for over 17 years. I can just short of guarantee that this story will force even the non-believers to check that dark corner before drifting off to dreamland. I was 11 years old the first time I saw her. My parents were away for the evening, and I had ordered Scream on pay-per-view. I haven't watched a PPV movie in a long time, but back then it would play the movie on a 24-hour loop once ordered. Well into the second viewing, I got up from the couch to grab a drink from the kitchen. I was headed for the stairs when I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye. Hesitating for a moment, I took a deep breath and continued toward the stairway. Returning to the basement, the air seemed ominous. The room seemed darker. As I relaxed on my seat to watch the rest of my movie before bed, I saw what appeared as a strange silhouette standing near the bathroom door. I focused my full sight on what I thought was there. I blinked and it was gone. Boy, was this movie giving me the creeps. Then I heard it, the soft whisper of a young girl at first, followed by a much louder command. Let's play. Now, I have 2 older brothers, so I flipped on the light expecting to see them playing a trick on me with a flashlight and a tape recorder or something. These are the same brothers who used to hide a tow record player in my room blaring train sounds and throw me in with the lights off, holding the doorknob so I couldn't get out. Needless to say, teasing me during a horror movie would not have been above them. With the lights now on, I yelled, "Ben, Phil, stop it or I'm telling Mom." Silence. I figured I was just overtired. I curled up on the couch and felt my eyelids getting heavier as I finished watching my movie. Just before I drifted off, I heard Ben's bedroom door creak. I dismissed it, too tired to get myself worked up over nothing. I then got the sense something was watching me. I tried to shake it off. I just wanted to sleep. Finally, I heard something breathing heavily and slowly. At first, I thought it was me and that I was psyching myself out. So I held my breath for a moment. Nothing. Swearing off slasher movies forever, I turned to face the back of the couch, hoping that would help me get to sleep. "Can you play now?" The question came from lips that couldn't have been further than a few feet from the couch. "Still turn," I yelled. "I'm gonna tell Mom if you guys don't leave me alone." Within seconds, Ben and Phil were at the landing by the back door. "What the hell are you screeching about?" Ben asked, he and Phil not the least bit concerned about the panic on my face. "If you guys don't stop, I'm telling Mom when she gets home." As I spoke, I knew there was no way they could have been both places at once. The realization that my brothers were upstairs all night left me cold. I stood up from the couch and quickly marched upstairs to my room, praying I could just fall asleep and put this whole thing behind me. Unfortunately, I wasn't so lucky. 30 minutes into my restless shuffling, I was alerted to the sound of my bedroom door opening ever so gently. Jolting upward from my bed and opening my eyes, I became frozen as I saw, in the corner, a young girl with long black hair around the age of 6. In a once white nightgown, she stared at me with dark and blinking eyes and a wide smile. It was the kind of smile that you muster up for family picture day, in the sense I could tell it was for show. I began to open my mouth, hoping to scream or cry, anything that might scare her away. Before I could make my decision, she pulled her bony finger up to her still smiling mouth. "Now it's my turn to high," I yelled louder than I had ever yelled in my life. To my surprise, my mom came running into my room. "Honey, what's wrong?" she asked as I darted my eyes between her and the now empty corner of my bedroom. I couldn't answer. Was it a nightmare? Was my mind playing tricks on me? One thing was for sure. It was over. I shrugged it off as an all-too-real bad dream and went out to sleep on the couch in the living room. Fast forward about 3 weeks. It was around 10:30, and I was out playing Spot with Phil and nearly a dozen other neighborhood kids, for those of you wondering. Spot is a game of hide-and-seek played at night with flashlights. The rules were simple. We had to stay within our block. We weren't to go into backyards without permission, and you couldn't stay in one place for more than 5 minutes. I had been gearing up for this evening's game all week. I had the perfect hiding spot, and nobody would ever think to look there. Our next-door neighbors had a split-level house with a red deck off of the kitchen upstairs and plenty of room underneath for storage. Their yard wasn't fenced in, so it had easy access. I made my way under the deck and positioned myself behind their lawn mower. No way anyone will find me here, I thought. I had been crouched for around 3 minutes when I saw the beam of light coming from between the houses. My friend Mike was it, and he was running with his flashlight nearing my hiding spot. Without hesitation, he turned at the edge of the house, shined the light directly on me, and yelled, "Spot." There's no way he knew I was there. "How did you do that? Did Phil tell you about my hiding spot?" As I asked the question, I could tell he was paying little attention to me, how he searched the area. "Where did she go?" Mike asked, a little hesitant. "I've been chasing her for half a block, and I just watched her duck under this deck." I couldn't tell if he was trying to play a trick on me or if he was being genuine. Although I didn't want to know the answer, I asked, What was she wearing? As he answered, I felt a rush of cold all the way up my back, as if someone had splashed me with ice water. She had a long, kinda grayish pajama shirt on. It was really strange. Must be somebody's little sister. I leapt out from underneath the deck and stared at him for several seconds, reading his expressions. Mike, I've been under here this whole time, and you're the first person I've seen. With the small amount of light from his flashlight illuminating only a portion of his face, I watched his color fade. Whatever, this game's for babies anyway. I'm going home, he stated, visibly shaken, but doing his best to keep his composure. You're it now. He shoved the flashlight into my chest and walked quickly in the direction of his house. Although Mike was gone, I had a sudden awareness that I was not alone. Doing my best to avert my eyes from my once great hiding place, I pointed my flashlight back toward the street. My legs struggled to lift my feet. It was as if hands had emerged from the soft ground and clasped their menacing fingers around my ankles. In a desperate attempt to run, my legs had a different plan as I crashed, face first, into the wet grass. I lied on the ground, stunned for what felt like only a few seconds. Gathering my wits, I lifted my head to see bare, pale feet resting only inches from my nose. Ah! I screamed, suddenly sitting but leaning back on my hands. I had no words. That girl, the same one from my room, was standing over me. What once had been a vacant grin was replaced with a disgusting, angry snarl. That was my hiding spot. Her voice now a high-pitched shriek, like thick nails on a dirty classroom chalkboard. Her shadowed eyes pierced through me like a hot blade as she began to cry. She continued with a much quieter, more sinister tone, "It's your fault." It was at that moment I knew she wasn't talking about the game anymore. She lunged forward, flailing her arms, while she fell on top of me. I struggled to grab at her frozen wrists and hollered for anyone close who might be able to come help me. I caught one last glimpse of those sinister eyes before everything went black. I awoke to the sound of footsteps creeping up to me. "I'm sorry," I proclaimed, weak and covered in sweat. Just then a hand reached down and grabbed my arm. It was filled. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Everyone is going home now. We didn't know where you were and it's getting late." As I stood up, I realized I wasn't in our neighbor's backyard anymore. I had somehow managed to end up in my own driveway just a few feet from the front steps. "Are you hurt? What happened?" My brother was beginning to show worrying at my lack of response. I don't know." I stood there, still puzzled at how I had come to be in the driveway. "Well, we'd better go in. It's almost midnight," Phil continued. "Wait." "What?" The words left my mouth, and I began to grow more and more concerned as to what might have happened. After I blacked out, I had to tell him. There was a good chance he would think I was crazy, but I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. "I saw this girl." The front porch light came on and our dad stepped outside. He didn't have to say anything. We knew it was time to come in. The nightmares started that night. I lied in bed, staring at the ceiling for hours and doing my best not to look anywhere else, when I felt my eyelids getting heavy. With each flutter, I could picture her face, staring at me with that look of hatred and disgust. I fought the fatigue for as long as I could, finally succumbing to the night. They say you only remember bits and pieces of dreams and lose sight of what little you had as time marches on. But the horrors that plagued my subconscious for the next several nights are still as vivid and frightening as they were 17 years ago, reappearing every now and then, as not to let me forget. My first dream started out normal enough. I was with a couple of friends who have asked to remain nameless, and we were headed to an area near our house we all called Cherry Hill. It spanned several blocks and housed lots of trees, trails, hills, and even an old train trestle. We did all sorts of stuff there. We built forts, rode bikes, played tag, the stuff you'd expect kids to do. We were walking down the trail, boards and tools in hand, looking for just the right spot to build. Settling on an area tucked in by the trestle, we got to work. I was nailing some small boards to a tree to make a ladder leading up to a long ledge. It was to be our lookout. I could hear my friends digging some kind of hole behind me. After a while, the sound of their shovels stopped. That same chill I had felt under the deck was inching up my legs to my back, then to my neck. I whipped around to see that they were gone. In fact, everything was gone, the shovels, the hole. It was as if they had never been there at all. It had gotten very dark. The giant trees were blocking any trace of light shining from the evening sky. As I strained my eyes to scan the area, I locked in on a familiar nightgown across the small stream of murky water. I was panicked. Frozen in fear, I watched as she grew closer, never moving her limbs. She threw her head back in a disgusting cackle befitting a woman well her senior. I closed my eyes, hoping that would somehow slow my pounding heartbeat. Silence. I wasn't ready to open my eyes. My mind was racing, and I couldn't decide if I was awake or asleep. Before I had a chance to come to any conclusion, I felt a soft tug on my wrist. "They're gone now. Will you play with me?" It was that same soft voice I had heard in my basement. It wasn't creepy or angry. If I had to think of a word for it, I would say it almost sounded scared. No longer feeling threatened, I was ready to open my eyes. What a horrible mistake. She stood only inches from me, covered in blood, but with no visible wounds. Through the gore I could see the frills of her gown, now torn and crimson. The more frightened I became, the more pleased she seemed with herself. Turning to run, I had made it only a few steps before tripping and crashing into the cold dirt. I had to compose myself. I sat up and glanced at the object that forced me to topple over. Oh my God, no, the words left my mouth as I stumbled back even further. There, laid out in a heaping mess, were my friends. Next to them was a shovel covered in blood and hair. She stood over the bodies, that menacing grin returning to her face, and she slowly brought her finger up to her lips. I awoke on the living room couch. I know I fell asleep on my own bed, but with a history of sleepwalking, I wasn't surprised. One thing was for certain. I wasn't going back to sleep. I turned on the TV and watched infomercials until morning. I finally got up to make myself a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch as the rest of the family emerged from their rooms. I wanted to tell them what was happening to me, but I was sort of famous in our house for stupid nightmares. To this day, I still catch guff about the big green duck with a machine gun that would chase me around the neighborhood. Nobody was going to take me seriously. I had to find a way to handle this on my own. That night, before bed, I knelt down next to my bed and I locked my hands together in prayer. Dear Lord, I need your help. There is something evil here that won't leave me alone. I don't know why it would choose me. Did I do something wrong? I beg of you, Lord, please stop this. I will never ask you for anything ever again. Amen. I was dream-free for the next 2 nights. Maybe there was something to this prayer thing. It was Saturday, and a few of us had gotten together for a game of street hockey. We must have played for at least 2 hours before someone said, "Let's go to Cherry Hill." As soon as I heard it, that cold chill raced up my back. "I think I'm going to stay here." Guys, they weren't having that. After lots of prodding and pleading, we hopped on our bikes. We stayed near the entrance, making dangerous ramps out of leftover boards from our hockey goals. I wasn't that excited about going toward the trestle, but I figured there was strength in numbers. We were pointing out spots that would be ideal for a new fort. "There's a good spot," I said, pointing to a wall of dirt with an area already dug out. I was quickly outvoted, as it was clear someone else had already claimed that area. We ventured down the trail until we neared the old trestle. "This spot is too open." I pled my case and hoped for the best. It must have been let's do the opposite of what Jammy wants to do day, because everyone ignored me and headed down toward the water. Not wanting to let my fears get the best of me, I followed. I walked toward the lookout ledge from my dream. It was as if something was pulling me in that direction. Glancing at the tree, I noticed letters etched out in the bark. They spelled ouch. I was done. No more fort building for me. I jumped on my bike and sped home. I was still shaking when I pulled into the driveway. I refused to come to the door when a couple of my friends stopped over to check on me. I lied in bed, sobbing and cursing the ceiling. "Why won't you help me? I begged for your help and you didn't listen." I cried myself to sleep. My next nightmare was much shorter. It was a very strange dream, and that I felt like I was watching a slideshow. I remember watching an old, run-down farmhouse slowly fall to a pile of junk. But it was in pictures, with each one showing more age and decay. There was a tree in the front yard with a tire swing, and in every image there were children running around and playing. They didn't seem fazed by the crumbling house behind them. As the house aged, fewer kids were seen running around until only one remained. I watched as the last little girl stared at the ground, sad that her friends had left her. I watched her sadness turn to anger and then into resentment. The background grew dark, and her eyes met mine. The edges of her mouth turned up into that all the familiar grin. She knew I was watching her. She stood still for several minutes as the wind blew through the bare trees behind her. Suddenly everything went dark, and I heard the whisper, "What should we play next?" I avoided my room for the next several nights, finding any reason I could to stay up well past my bedtime. Although I feared coming across her while I was alone in the dark, it somehow felt safer than meeting her in a dream. She could manipulate me in my nightmares. I couldn't look away. I tried obscene amounts of Mountain Dew, bright lights from the TV, and music to avoid surrender to the night. I finally figured out that if I slept during the day, she left me alone. I still wonder to this day if she was fueled by my fear. I was calmed by the light of day. It kept me safe. I had nearly forgotten all about her by the time she visited me again. Weeks had passed, and I had started sleeping in my bed again. This final encounter was, by far, the creepiest. I consider this my final encounter because I truly believe any dreams since then have been residual, albeit terrifying. I awoke to the wind blowing my curtains across my face. This was significant because I have terrible allergies, and I am unable to sleep with the windows open. As soon as my eyes opened, I could hear faint laughter coming from the front yard. It almost sounded like the overused laugh track that goes with any clip of children playing in movies and television. I attempted to sit up and quickly realized I had no control of my own movements. I felt paralyzed. Before long, I was lifted out of bed and placed, standing on my bedroom floor. I began walking toward the window, still unable to move my own limbs. At the screen, I watched as this beautiful little girl skipped and sang through the grass without notice of the world around her. This time I didn't feel as if she knew I was there. Mesmerized for nearly a full minute, I finally snapped out of it to find I was no longer in my own room. From my surroundings, I could tell that this bedroom belonged to a girl. The walls were covered in bright pinks, purples, and yellows, with tons of princess doll houses, Barbies, and dresses scattered along the floor and in the open closet. I stood in the middle of the room, still unable to move, and watched as the door flew open, and that same little girl from the front yard came running in, crying. When she dashed by me without looking, I didn't think that she could see me. Had I become the ghost? The girl jumped into the closet, and her eyes locked onto mine. As footsteps grew louder down the hall, she looked at me, put her finger up to her mouth, and gave a soft shh. Who was she hiding from? Why was she crying? I stood and watched as a tall man wearing a baseball cap, red t-shirt, and jeans marched into the room with a menacing, "Come out. Come out wherever you are." The little girl kept her stare on me as tears rolled down her face. I tried to ask him who he was looking for, but he didn't respond. Couldn't he see me? His tone quickly changed. Where the hell did that B asterisk 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 H go? I still couldn't tell if he knew I was there, but I knew she must be hiding for a reason, so I decided to keep my mouth shut. He gave one last look around the room and left. I watched him walk down the hallway until I could no longer see him. Then, when I turned to the closet, she was gone. In the blink of an eye, all of the room's bright colors turned to shades of gray. I heard shots coming from another room in the house. Without hesitation, I ran toward the screams. When I got into the living room, the little girl was lying on the floor. This time she was wearing that same nightgown from my earlier visions. The man in the ball cap was standing over her, and I could tell that she was uncomfortable. "Let's play a game, sweetie. It's called the quiet game." Although his words were sweet, I knew his intentions were anything but. She was terrified. Her eyes were telling a story of fear and sadness. I panicked. "Leave her alone." I yelled the words as loudly as I could. I'm not sure what I was expecting to happen, but my shouts fell on deaf ears. It was no use. She turned again to look at me. I began to feel lightheaded, like I was losing oxygen. Everything went dark, but I could still hear the faint cries of a scared little girl. The cries were followed by wet, gurgling sounds, and that's when I heard the sound that still gives me chills as I write these words. As if he was right by my face, I heard the man whisper one last request. Shh. I woke up right after that and sobbed in my bed for what seemed like hours. Aside from the occasional nightmare, I haven't seen the little girl since. Although I haven't seen her, I still feel like she's around. I spent time in libraries and news archives hoping to come across a story of a familiar missing girl, or maybe even something on the man in the cap. I believe my dream of the deteriorating house means the potential scene of the crime is long gone. I suppose it's best that I leave it be. But the question I fear will forever go unanswered is, was I just a kid with an overactive imagination, or was a frightened little girl reaching out for help that I failed to provide? Sweet dreams.